In this video, I will be talking about why I think monarchy is a superior form of government to what we have now, and just in general, its positive aspects. That in mind, what do we demand of our governments in order to consider them as an effective and just governing body? I have essentially broken down the measures of an effective government into three categories: reliability, relatability, and accountability. But before I explain why I think monarchy excels above all others, I should do my best to define it. As is tradition, a monarchy is usually a system by which a single person holds sole authority over a kingdom. This system came about through the passage of spiritual rights from father to firstborn son. Throughout the passage of time, from the days when we slept under the starry night sky to the days of large castles, the original monarchs were leaders of warriors who protected their people from raiders and other kingdoms. Monarchs also served as judges in legal matters, deciding matters of honor, which was the predecessor system to a codified law. The spiritual aspect of the monarch is not to be underestimated, because through this piety, monarchs were supposed to be exemplars of the virtues of the people. People gathered to monarchs on the understanding that they agreed with the values of their monarch. And so, with the monarch being an inherited role, the people expected the royal family to carry on these principles. Having described the basis for how monarchs and kingdoms came into existence through military ability and spiritual insight, I can now begin to explain why a monarchy is superior to a republic. I'll start by explaining the accountability of a monarchy. In short, the monarch is the sole authority of the governing body, meaning every decision made is signed off on by the monarch. This is important in that it clearly defines responsibility for decision making. This forces a monarch to be more cautious in their decision making because it is their name on the dotted line, whether it be on loans or diplomatic agreements. This is different compared to democratic governments, who instead of signing their own names on the agreement to handle payment, they sign the names of their governments. Therefore, it is possible for one party to apply for a loan, lose an election, and have another political party have to deal with the consequences. This forces democratic governments to favor short-term gains over long-term gains. After all, if you're able to increase the spending for your term of office and you're able to buy the people's happiness, you will get re-elected. However, if you are compelled to repay those loans through making budget cuts and thus reducing the ability of infrastructure the people rely on, you would be unpopular and so more likely to lose office. Furthermore, when it comes to resolving problems with citizens, monarchies have a big advantage over democracies in that there is less bureaucracy involved. When you petition a monarch, it normally involves handing over grievances directly to the head of state, as opposed to democracy, which demands you get a prerequisite amount of signatures, have the parliament approve time for discussion, and even if you succeed in all of that, it won't be you who presents the petition to a faceless mob of representatives, but the Speaker of the House who is free to butcher your petition as they see fit. Moving on to reliability, in the case of a monarchy, the country is essentially regarded as part of the royal estate. That means the monarch owns everything, either wholesale or in part, and I'm sure many people are put off by this. And that is, the monarch is the owner of government assets. The onus is on them to maintain them at a cost-effective level. Many democracies are famously bad with maintaining government apparatus, with ballooning costs as well as many redundant structures, which are maintained solely for the possible abusive uses to further the personal agendas of politicians. The most infamous example of this is the United States of America, which is famed for having a massive military budget, which is beyond obscene, as well as government organizations like the CIA and FBI, which repeatedly abuse American citizens and break the law, all for the gain of shadowy figures. As a result, the national debt of democracies is demonstrably higher than that of monarchies, because there is no one to hold to account. The president who signs up for a loan is not the president who pays it back. Whereas with monarchs, it is very likely that it would be the same monarch, if not the same royal estate, that is liable for the loan. And as such, overspending is contained because the sustainability of the state is a key factor in decision making, as a monarch is succeeded by his heir, whereas other forms of government lack such a focus on making sure the future generations have something to inherit. We then arrive at relatability, or how does a government best represent a people? A monarch is a traditionally inherited title. As such, a monarch must show reverence to their predecessors, their sacrifices, and beliefs. In this way, a monarch legitimizes themselves. After all, if they were to disrespect their ancestors and their wishes, then could they legitimately claim to be the rightful heir if they reject the wishes and beliefs of their predecessors? As such, it is imperative for a monarch to be not only a torchbearer for tradition, but its greatest advocate. To this end, the traditional values of a nation is passed down without breach from the distant past into the distant future. These are tried and tested values that few people could ever argue against. Compared to democracy, compared to a democracy where the values of the government is governed by who has the most financial influence over the parties or whatever lies that a politician needed to say in order to get elected. With each election, the values of government is changed in accordance to the flavor of the day, which is influenced through media and current events. With a monarchy, there is a defined set of values that people generally accept, regardless of socio-economic position, as well as current events. These values are philosophical and culturally defining, as opposed to personal. When you live in a democracy, it is the most popular values that are advocated for, and for everyone else who holds opposing values, they must be forced into line through legislation and intimidation. You may be asking yourself, if monarchy has shown itself to be superior to democracy in terms of performance, why is it that so many of the Western nations are democracies as opposed to monarchies? Simply put, the democratization of Europe was the result of interference by the United States of America in the World Wars. As a condition of support for American intervention, as well as the result of enslaving Europe through debt, America demanded that Europe become democratized. This was done with the goal of making the United States the hegemon of the West. For up till now, the United States had only been a small player in the world, and had, for the most part, been entirely dependent on European innovation. It is no small surprise that the United States was able to manipulate the situation to their benefit. As a result of being a democracy, the United States was able to take on much more debt with little short-term downsides, whereas the many monarchies of Europe were already struggling due to bearing the brunt of two world wars. Ironically enough, had the United States not played both sides of the war in selling weapons and sending funds, the world wars in Europe would have been a lot less destructive, since the monarchs would be forced to take into consideration the long-lasting financial implications of sustaining such a destructive war. To this day, America plays an unfortunately prevalent role in European politics, as it tries to exploit any opportunity for short-term monetary gain. As a result of the actions of the United States, however, a new crisis has risen due to the inherent flaws in democracy. The United States of America has one of the largest amounts of national debt in the world, and as such is sitting on a ticking time bomb that will inevitably lead to its destruction. Thus we see the rewards reaped by those who would undo all the good our ancestors have done for our benefit for short-term profit. The United States will likely collapse as a result of its massive debt, and as a matter of fact, we are bearing witness to this as we speak. However, the opportunity to establish a kingdom for us is still on the table. As Europeans are inherently noble and carry millennia-old traditions and values, it is possible for great men to rise and offer salvation. At the end of the day, history reveals all, with only two known republics of Europe having disastrous consequences, those being the Romans and the French, with many kingdoms outliving and outperforming them both. It is unlikely that this pattern will be broken with the current state of affairs.